Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. I'm Patrick Daugherty, joined as always by Denny Carter and Kyle Dvorchak. It is June 1st. It's not the beginning of official summer. That's June 20th or whatever. It is meteorological. I can't ever say that word, summer, though. For all intents and purposes, it is summer. And let me tell you what, I stepped outside and began sweating immediately.
I think we're still like 2-3 weeks away.
Maybe in Maryland. I don't know how they do it out there. And
I mean, it's hot, but that doesn't. It's hot in summer. There's an actual way to go about this to define summer.
I will define it by me being hot. That's why. That's the definition.
Hot. That's the definition. I don't know why I already derailed the show because we're gonna say what we're gonna talk about real quick. We might talk about James Garoppolo yet again, Breece Hall in the Jets backfield, Javonte Williams in the Broncos backfield. Some of these backfields basically where there's injury optimism. And then some receiver cores where there is, delusion optimism. Yeah. Chiefs and Kadarius Toney getting talked up again. An interesting Panthers group. We're actually going to start the show about the Panthers and then boomerang back around to the Panthers. A Patriots skill core where there's no hype at all for the Patriots skill core. Oh. This is everyone's like, yeah, it seems pretty bad still. Denny has an Easter egg player at the end of the show. He wants to talk about actually is the day 2 draft pick who could have a big role early in the season. We're going to talk about that near the end of the show. But yeah, the Panthers, we couldn't help but notice, but right before we came on the air today, new Panthers coach Frank Reich said, quote, the Panthers will try to experiment with Laviska Shenault this season. This time it counts in similar ways to how the 49ers utilized Deebo Samuel.
That's right.
He's raced through the end real quick because he didn't actually want to say it out loud. And then you notice this is a trend.
And this is what you say. It's been 4 years now with Laviska Shenault, and this is what you say when you're a coach and you watch Shenault's tape and you look at him in practice and you go, "Damn, I don't know what to do with this guy. Let's just call him one of the best receivers in the game in Deebo Samuel and be done with it." And by Deebo, what they mean is he is incapable of being a traditional receiver. And so therefore, if you connect the dots, he is Deebo Samuel. It's quite the leap, but we've seen this before. We've seen this before and we will see it again.
It used to be Percy Harvin. The Zoomers, of course, won't remember.
Oh, man, yes.
Famous Seahawks kick returner, Percy Harvin? Right? Famous Seahawks kick returner.
He was Jamal Adams before Jamal Adams was Jamal Adams, where the Seahawks traded their entire team. He came to Seattle and just didn't do anything at all. But receiver couldn't really catch, but who would basically just flatten you when he was running. Like a true rolling ball of butcher knives. So then you have a receiver who didn't really catch well, but was kind of a yak man. Yak men were looked down upon back in those days in 2014, 2015. You just called him Percy Harvin. But yeah, now one of these men has actually ascended to superstar status in Deebo Samuel. So the comparison has become more problematic because now you're comparing them to one of the 2 or 3 best players in the receivers in the NFL. Also, it's more like 8 or 9 best, by the way. Yeah, not 2 or 3.
Yeah, let's not get over our skis here. But I do think that it's not a coincidence that both Percy Harvin and Deebo Samuel are, I'm checking my notes, constantly injured, or we're constantly injured because they're basically given the ball at the line of scrimmage, and the team says, Go do your thing.
Go be a running back, even though you're 5'11", 182.
Yeah, pounds. Just go bulldoze into everybody and gain yards. There you go. That's good. Now come back to the huddle. We're gonna do it again. and so if Laviska is deployed in this way, I'm guessing it won't end well. For him. I wrote the player profile for Laviska Shenault for our upcoming fantasy football magazine.
Oh, he's in the magazine. Actually, I didn't know that.
And at least I wrote the profile. We'll see.
Well, Pat, as you know, we write a lot of receivers. A lot of players get their names mentioned, and Laviska is one of them.
It's been removed. I've already told Norbert or Lindy's to not let that one see print.
Look, I looked for the positive, because for those who don't know, and if you're listening to this podcast in the beginning of June, then you're probably very much into fantasy football, and we appreciate that. Okay. But if you don't know, Laviska Shenault is a fantasy football folk legend. Okay, I'm not even sure he exists in like this plane of existence. But I mean, we have as a community generally, we have wanted him to be a thing desperately since he was drafted
Our
by the
entire
Jaguars.
lives.
Because we love our athletic guys, don't we, folks? We love our athletic supermen, and he is one. He is one. Unfortunately, the athletic supermen always come with the caveat of coaches having no clue how to use them on.
It is. We love the mold breakers, and a lot of times they are like genuine mold breakers, but these guys just aren't creative enough, these coaches, to like know what to do.
No.
Which is why like a Deebo Samuel pairing with a Kyle Shanahan comes around like once every like 10 or 15 years, basically. Like Deebo would just be going to waste if he had been a Houston Texan and he had three different offensive coordinators in 5 years. But he happened to get handpicked by the one guy who like actually knows what to do with these people.
That is a great point. I probably Deebo is probably not even a known quantity if he doesn't go to San Francisco. Not because he's not good, but because he wouldn't have been deployed correctly. No. And I know, look, we're talking with Pat Daugherty, the number one Kyle Shanahan hater in the United States.
Oh, come on. I ranked him as the fourth best coach.
but you did so begrudgingly. I know you were crying blood when you did that.
Kyle Juszczyk, just stop. Just stop. Anyway,
stop with Kyle Juszczyk. He's a football player. I'm sorry if that triggers you.
He's a great
but you're right. It is because he landed in San Francisco, and thank goodness, because we've gotten a lot of great plays, a lot of great football watching at Deebo Samuel.
Kyle, before we move on to the real show, do you know the team that drafted Percy Harvin? You probably do.
It was the Vikings, I assume.
Yeah, it was. Do you know what college he played for?
He was a Vol, right? Was he Tennessee?
Oh, no.
Where is he?
No,
Florida.
The UF, UF as it was known back then, and is still known as UF.
Oh, wait.
I was like, wait, what changed?
I think CPAT was a Vol because
he was a Vol, but then
they're the same thing to me.
Didn't he have CPAT's a lot bigger than Percy? Maybe CPAT's actually not a lot bigger than Percy Harvin. I think I remember. Percy
CPAT's
Harvin.
massive, dude. CPAT is the guy who it makes sense for him to change to running back because he's like 6'2", 215, entering the league as a receiver. Whereas the difference for like Percy Harvin and for Deebo Samuel is that like there's a reason they cap out at 50 carries and Cordero Patterson literally changes his position mid-career. It's because Cordero Patterson was built like a bus in a good way. Like he's just so bulky. Whereas these guys are receiver bulky. I will say, you look at Laviska Shenault, he's somewhere in between receiver bulky and running back bulky. And he has stylistically the run of a running back too.
He could be on a CPAT trajectory for sure. Like he's on the disappointing part, and we'll see if he gets the cool part.
He's the part where the Patriots let him start one game at running back, and you're like, hold on, wait, keep him in the league another year. And that's maybe where we are, especially with the coaching staff change. But I even looked back, like, again, we talked about, it takes a certain type of coach and then for them to find a certain type of player. I'm not sure Frank Reich there are very few of this certain type of player of true hybrids. Frank Reich hasn't found him, though. I looked through every year in his tenure with at least the Colts, no receiver over like 50 rushing yards, not even just attempts, obviously. So I don't know. This is, like Denny said, the thing about Deebo is that he is an incredible wide receiver who just has some running back characteristics. It's not that he can't play, but there are other things he can do. And coaches, at least, especially media members, but also coaches, seem to confuse the fact that he can play running back with a lot of the other guys who supposedly can play running back, which for them, it mostly just means they can't play receiver.
We got to get on to the normal show, but I said 5'11", 180 earlier. Percy Harvin was 5'11", 184. Deebo is a lot bigger than that. He's like 6', 215 or something. But by the way, Denny, you want to feel really bad.
I do.
Percy Harvin is only 35.
Oh my God!
Feels like he's been out of the league like since the Reagan administration.
Well, first of all, let's not get political. But secondly, I he had a tough career. I mean, now you talk about a guy who needed help getting up after every single tackle.
It's true. It's true. Percy Harvin.
I mean,
he will never, quote, not have stick out his hand for someone on the other team to pull him up.
Well, hey, look, he was a tough runner. He also had no regard for his body. And you saw it because he would have to be scraped off the turf 15 times a game.
That's true.
It was tough to watch.
Absolutely no regard for his body. We had absolutely no regard for a structured opening of this show. It's been 10 minutes. We were actually talking about football, so that was good. I said we were talking about Jimmy G. I don't know. Do we even really need to? We did last week.
I don't know if we're going to be very informative with it, but it is like
Denny and I, Kyle, I'll throw to you on Jimmy G first. Denny and I last week talked about we talked about the surgery. We didn't know about the out clause in his contract yet. That was the development since our last show, that the Raiders can cut Jimmy G without penalty this summer because he, quote, needed foot surgery. What do you think? Denny is exhaling, wanting to speak, but I'm going to let Kyle talk first to Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well, I believe, to be specific, right, they can cut him without any penalty if specifically he doesn't pass his physical, because he has not passed a physical yet, if I'm getting this story right.
Also, though, if he plays any regular season game, so he doesn't have to pass the physical, but if they make him the week 1 starter, then it's guaranteed. Yeah.
Is he allowed to play those games without passing a physical? I assume
you actually are. You can play without
passing. That's an OSHA violation. I'd like to report that to OSHA. There's no way you're allowed to. So, yeah, it's all health related. I mean, it's funny. Do you guys remember them canceling the press conference when, all the details of the report leaked? I think I was on blurb duty. So I'm like, the press conference will be on. I'll see Raiders Twitter post clips from it. And I'm like, wasn't that press conference going on there? What happened? I find a beat reporter and there's it felt like an hour before. It could have been
locked in a closet and I hear Mark Davis screaming and making Josh McDaniels cry again.
I feel like Josh McDaniels is the one who makes the rest of them cry.
No, dude, Mark Davis was calling. He was going down into the locker room after every game last year. The Raiders just gave up a last-second field goal again, and Mark Davis is going into the locker room. That's interesting. Right. And,
I respect that.
He's had it. He's fed up with his horrible coaches. But
yeah, we are in weird Twilight Zone level danger of what do they even do if they don't have Jimmy Garoppolo? Say he doesn't get healthy, and they're yeah, we're gonna save the money and we're gonna cut him. They need an exit strategy because, of course, the obvious Super Bowl contending exit strategy of getting Jarrett Stidham back, that's gone, right? Yeah, that one's just out of there. So what do? They pull the trigger on Ryan Tannehill. Is that's probably better than Jimmy, but to a degree which you care? I don't know.
So I have an interesting stat to share about our guy Jimmy Garoppolo, who is deeply, unfortunately, an EPA hero.
He is.
I'm going to make a quick distinction. Kyle Shanahan is an EPA hero.
That's right.
See about Jimmy.
That's right. No. But let me share.
And Jimmy G is his paintbrush. Kyle Shanahan is an EPA artist, and Jimmy G is his paintbrush.
I'm pretty sure I would be 4th in EPA in Kyle Shanahan.
I think so.
I mean,
he would be 17th. It'd be a rebuilding season. And no one would have any memory of you ever throwing a touchdown. Right. When they pulled up Ben Baldwin's website, that Denny Carter was 17th in EPA.
Wow, just a guy off the street.
Minus 25% in CPOE. Weird about that one. He couldn't complete a single pass to save his life, but EPA was actually pretty good.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, then your stat. Go ahead with your EPA.
Yeah, my stat. Here's my stat. So Jimmy was behind one of the best offensive lines in the league over the past few years. Last year, Pro Football Focus rated the Niners offensive line is the 4th best pass blocking unit in the league. He goes to a worse Vegas offensive line, not bottom barrel, but much worse than the Niners. Jimmy Garoppolo's EPA per dropback went from 3rd when not pressured last year to 33rd when pressured. So I'm thinking this is not going to work. I'm thinking that the statuesque Jimmy G is not. I mean, what over under has to be set on 8.5 games, and I don't know how I could.
At least he's healthy now, though.
famous last words.
Plus, he's not. Sorry, was the joke, Kyle?
You're right. You're talking about Purdue rookie Aiden O'Connell starting multiple games for the Raiders, and Davante Adams again. I do just question Davante's decision making. In going to Vegas. Did he think that the Raiders would suddenly become a good franchise just because he's there? And the answer is obviously no. And his season is going to be tough.
His life is already in ruins. He's constantly posting very long Insta messages, and like he is down tremendously bad.
Just wait, man. Just wait. It's gonna, Javonte, if you're listening, it's gonna get so much worse. You just have
it
no
is
idea.
gonna go. So producer Adams over under is 6.5 for the Raiders. I actually thought about tweeting earlier today. I don't know what the Raiders over under is, but I am hammering the under on it.
I mean, if it was 4.5, I'm going under.
6.5 is real high. It's funny. I feel like Josh McDaniels, he lost his Mac Jones Waterloo, I think, where, Kyle Shanahan, the whole planet knows Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones, although now there will be 10 49ers fans tweeting at me. That was not actually. That's become a very controversial topic, but Josh McDaniels had his Mac Jones in the roster and Jarrett Stidham. He just clearly loved the guy. Just absolutely loved Jarrett Stidham. And then he lets him get out from under his nose to Sean Payton. Who, man, does anyone have more of that quote his guys than Sean Payton?
Oh man,
like Sean Payton just like basically drives a motorcycle around all 32 NFL stadiums and like picks up his guys.
Yeah,
Samaje Perine, Jarrett Stidham, we are riding, folks. Adam Troutman, we are riding.
Look, Greg Dulcich is up in Peyton's face every day at practice, going, "My name is Greg, Sean. It's Greg. Stop calling me Jim." He's like, "Look, Greg. If you didn't play for the 2013 Saints, I don't know who the hell you are. All right, get out there and practice a little bit, buddy."
He has no idea. I have no idea what we're even talking about. I think it was Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if we really learned anything from that conversation.
Well, okay. Real quick, on a somewhat serious fantasy note, I'm very hesitant to take Davante Adams at ADP. That's what I.
Do you guys think? Serious question. I mean, it's hard for a player of his caliber. Do you think after the trade deadline, Davante Adams will still be on the Raiders? Because I feel like that is a situation that actually could come to a head because he's pissed off. They're gonna have no use for him if they're like 2-5. Like it'd be the last time he's got like serious trade value.
Yeah,
I'd say there's probably like a 20 to 30% chance Davante Adams gets traded in season, which
I don't know.
Is really high for like a superstar player. But I don't. What is the ending here? There's no happy ending whatsoever with this marriage at this point.
Well, I don't know the financials because every time I tweet something like that, oh, well, they should trade. They're like, oh, well, they have to absorb a dead cap hit of $1.8 billion. I
was going to say, well, I hope you have $232 million, Denny, because Mark Davis certainly doesn't.
Right. and so then I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's not happening. But, I mean, hopefully for fantasy purposes, hopefully Adams does land somewhere else at some point this year. He's going right now. He's going as the wide receiver 8, which is pretty low. I mean, I think that this disastrous situation that's brewing has been baked into his ADP a bit. He's going after CeeDee Lamb, after AJ Brown, which I think is right. But then you look down and like I might take Amon-Ra St. Brown over Davante Adams at this point.
It's a tough situation.
I have no problems with that.
I'd probably still take Davante, but man, because Davante is at least a guy where it's not like you have to be hitting him with a million downfield targets. Like he can Amon-Ra with the best of them if you need him to.
What about Garrett Wilson? What are you guys doing? Wilson or Adams?
Davante and just drinking tears by week 4, knowing it was the worst thing I've ever done.
What do you think, Kyle?
Garrett, have some fun in life. Get some Mountain Dew in you, Pat.
Hey, I know a thing or two about having fun. It's called having 4 kids. Am I right? Am I right?
I can tell you one thing. Davante Adams drafters will have no fun.
No, it was true. I have not drafted him yet. I'm already in.
Like it's gonna be like painful. Even if he comes away, even if his final stat line is 9 catches on 19 targets for 90 yards and a touchdown, that's gonna be the toughest 9 catches, 90 yards touchdown performance you've ever seen. It's just gonna be brutal.
So there's not much injury optimism on Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a lot of injury optimism on some pretty highly drafted running backs. The first of which is Breece Hall in New York. The sharpest drafting group going right now is the Underdog fantasy group. Breece Hall is the RB11. Even though we just don't know his early season status, we do know that the Jets have gotten more and more encouraged by his early season status, and they're really talking up Breece Hall. Robert Saleh this week said he was very optimistic Hall will play week 1. He even tried. He basically seemed like he was trying to calm himself down. He said, you don't want to go too fast with an injured ACL, but he looks strong. He looks powerful. So he's looking into it very powerfully to Breece Hall being ready for week 1. And like, I almost feel like now there's going to be like a tendency to get over-scarred by the J.K. Dobbins situation, where before last year, it was just like an article of faith. Like, you tore your ACL like 10 or 11 months before week 1. Like, whatever, you're going to be fine for week 1. We're not even worried about you. J.K. Dobbins reminded that is not the case, but that also J.K. Dobbins was a pretty kind of close to a worst case outcome. His career could have been over, but most ACL recoveries go more smoothly than that, Kyle. Like, do we really have faith Breece Hall is going to be like ready to rock in week 1?
Yeah, I have relatively decent faith. And the thing that makes me feel better about it is when, I'm going to say when, I'm not going to say if he gets up to speed. When he gets up to speed, I assume it's not, J.K. Dobbins, like you said, not worst case scenario, but for guys who return the next season, that's like worst case scenario among returners. Assuming it's not that type of scenario, even if they ease him in after a few weeks, I mean, he was just stone cold elite last year. He was an incredible receiver, second in yards per route run among players with 30 targets. He got to that 30 target threshold quite quickly because, as you'll remember, didn't play many games. He was also an elite runner. He was second in yards after contact per attempt on at least 50 carries. That checks out with his college profile. He was a really strong pass catcher in college, at least usage-wise, and he was a workhorse back in college. So, to me, everything we've seen so far, college, small bit of NFL, says this guy is like one of the next really good fantasy running backs. He's also just big. He's like 220 pounds, which is a really important threshold to meet for guys who are trying to get 300 plus touches. Like, offense is going to be better. Mm-hmm. Everything is wheels up except for the health, and the wheels are starting to turn now to look in the right direction. I want to be consistently ahead of ADP and like of consensus rankers, which for a magazine, I am way ahead of you guys on Breece Hall. I kind of just want to keep it that way.
Yeah, you are way, way ahead. I did move him up in my final ranks a little bit, by the way.
I think he's my RB8 right now. He's like my dynasty RB2.
Way too high, Denny.
I mean, yeah, I think it's tough to say like in May or June to say like, I guess we're in June now, so I'll say June. To say, oh yes, I feel confident that he's going to walk into, decent volume to start the season. I think that we're probably looking at, a very closely monitored workload to start the year because they value this guy a lot as a workhorse, and I don't think that they want to push him. Like you said, Robert Saleh was very careful with his language the other day in talking about the injury, talking about how to rehab it, how to get back. So I think that mindset shows us something and says that if you draft him, you can't. You're not betting on 20 touches for Breece Hall until, I don't know, October, November, somewhere in there.
They do have some depth too. I mean, Izzy Abanikanda is getting some rookie hype. He was hyped before the draft. I mean, Zonovan Knight might not even make the team, but he's proven like he can like be your lead back for a few games if you need someone to just basically absorb some carries. Michael Carter is still around. In theory, he can play all 3 downs. They also could just be leaning on the pass a lot. Now with Aaron Rodgers, like they might not need to lean on the run nearly as much while Breece Hall gets healthy. So it is. I agree. He's being drafted as if he's going to assume basically like bell cow workloads from week 1 on.
Yeah,
and he might be healthy, but I don't know about the bell cow thing.
I think the draft is the implication that the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season, like you're fine eating him as like even if he's just like an RB2-3, like truly they don't work him up to RB1 like usage until, like Denny said, October. Sure, that's 4 weeks at most of like usable but not great usage. And if he does work up to the potential that like I think he's clearly shown, it's like a top 3 to 5 running back is very easily within the range of outcomes. And you get that when it matters. Like, of course, like all of the weeks matter, but they don't all matter equally. The championship week, the subsequent weeks before that matter more as you get close to the spots we care about, whether it's a best ball context or just winning your single league. Those are the weeks we want most. And if he's capable of dropping a 25 or 30 touch game late in the season, I'm willing to eat like a dozen touches per game for the first 3 or 4 weeks.
So it's hard to stifle our optimism on Breece Hall. Different situation with Javonte Williams in Denver, who is recovering from a torn ACL, LCL, and PCL, much more of a J.K. Dobbins type situation. And the Broncos have been like very cautious with their Javonte Williams language for a long time, basically not making like any promises whatsoever. But then again, they only added Samaje Perine. They didn't do anything in the draft in the backfield. Sean Payton now is kind of like inching his toes into like Javonte Williams' optimism. Or May 13th, he said Javonte hopefully won't need the PUP list, which would cost him 4 games. But now like they tried to have like the charade that he was practicing in OTAs as a limited capacity, but they're trying to make it seem like now he might be ready for week 1. Sean Payton is the least transparent injury updater like in the entire league. You basically can't listen to like anything he says, Denny. And is this much more of a J.K. Dobbins like proceed with major caution type situation?
Yeah, I mean, and I know this like the running joke where I only talk about Samaje Perine, but Sean Payton says the reason we got Perine in part is because we're not sure about how our backfield will look come week 1, and he's right. Like I know that Sean Payton cannot be trusted with injury information. I totally agree with you at all. Like, in fact, you should maybe assume the opposite.
You actually probably should assume the opposite.
That's probably safer
information.
But I do think that most of the tea leaves, which the Zoomers are always talking about the tea leaves, are saying that Javonte is either not going to play early in the season at all, or is going to be really, really limited. His ADP doesn't reflect that yet. So let's wait a little bit in the summer. I do think that there is a scenario where he drops to a spot in the draft where he becomes tempting.
He might already be there. He's the RB 29. Like that is, I don't know. I feel like too. I did our pre-draft profile on Javonte Williams. I'm like, man, the way we talk about Javonte Williams, you would think that he had been better than these numbers and these.
I was going to pitch in a sort of similar sentiment. He's been really efficient. He's been an interesting pass catcher, but like part of the definition I think you're getting at of better is the fantasy angle of like touching the ball a lot. I think that's real life and fantasy better to some extent. In 21 career games, he's gotten 20 or more touches once. Breece Hall played 7 games as a rookie and crossed that threshold twice. Like, I get that the situations are obviously different, but just as a strong rule of thumb, through 2 seasons, you'd like to see a potential workhorse back get any amount of that workhorse role, and we just didn't see it. Even the few games we saw last year, even in a second to last game, he played fewer than half of the team's snaps. Like, he was still being used as a committee back, and that tracks with his college stuff. Again, he had a good running back, Michael Carter, alongside him in college, but he was a committee back in college. He's been a committee back for 1.25 or whatever seasons in the NFL. And Breece Hall was a workhorse in college, and then after 3 weeks was getting his 20-touch games in the NFL. So they're different both in the extremeness, the extreme nature of the injury. And Breece Hall already got there, right? We're already looking like we proved ourselves right on Breece after just a few games. Javonte is still a projection on just getting the level of workload you want to see from a guy with his skill set. So I agree. Like, you look at how excited we are about Javonte, and we still need to see the role too, let alone the health.
So I'm going to say that I hate to use this as a crutch, but I actually love using this as a crutch. I'll say it does depend on how you draft your fantasy teams with how you treat Javonte Williams, because he's going to RB 29. So you have guys like James Conner, Alexander Madison, of course, whose ADP could change at any moment, depending on the Dalvin Cook situation, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, those guys of that nature, right? So if you go heavy on running back early on, I think that Javonte, and push back if you guys want to, but I think that Javonte becomes more viable at that ADP because you can just kind of sit him on your bench and wait, But for me, like, if I'm in that range and I have like 3 receivers and a tight end, I'm dying for some backfield touches right away.
Yeah.
Like I need my James Conner. I need my James getting 22 touches for 70 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, I need that at that point.
It is interesting. I was just thinking with Javonte that even if he remained like a 12 to 15 touch player, we do have a lengthy history of Sean Payton making 12 to 15 touch players very relevant. Even guys like Pierre Thomas, and then of course making Alvin Kamara a top 5 back on those kind of workloads. Not the kind of talent that Alvin Kamara is, Javonte Williams, but I did maybe kind of reassure myself thinking like, hey, he doesn't need 20 touches with Sean Payton to like kind of get in like that low end RB1 mix. But RB 29 does seem very optimistic. Just considering the extreme uncertainty. But I guess it does speak to there is upside. There is genuine upside. And it's kind of like you got to spend money to make money type of pick. Like there's risk with it.
It is. There is. But if you have the luxury of just, if you a luxury of resting him on your bench, on your fantasy bench, then you do it. If not, I just don't know how you take that sort of risk.
I feel like that's such a horrible idea in fantasy football. Like fantasy baseball, April like doesn't even matter. Like almost literally doesn't matter. Fantasy football, you're like, whatever. My 5th round pick doesn't play the first 4 games. Like who cares?
Yeah.
And then after the first 4 games, you're already like eliminated from the playoffs.
People do that. The injuries, these early season injuries can last 33% of the season can just like disappear like that. Whereas, a sport like baseball, you play 3 years and you're a quarter of the way done with 1/4 of the season, right?
It's June 1st and none of my top 4 picks have even played yet, and I'm in 6th. It's fine. It's totally fine. But my baseball team is falling apart, by the way. I needed, honestly, to take a restraining order against myself to not draft Kris Bryant again. And read on in Rotoworld this morning, he's back on the injured list.
He's not doing well.
No, he's not.
I was gonna ask you, doesn't he play on the moon? Doesn't he play in the Rockies? But he doesn't play right now.
You would think he'd maybe hit a few homers in a stadium at 25,000 feet, but he doesn't do it.
You know who you should have drafted, Pat. You should have drafted all the Orioles, my Orioles.
That's true. Man, I wish Adley was kept. Gunnar Henderson was actually kept. Oh, he's off to a poor start.
I love my Orioles.
I know you love your O's. We love our breaks. We'll be right back after this. Every season is draft season. Get your Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts. It's packed with profiles, rankings, and projections. Order today and get all 3 Rotoworld Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BARRY to save an extra 20% off at checkout. That is promo code BERRY to save an extra 20% off at checkout. And don't forget, download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It is available in your app store today. In the Rotoworld app, also telling me that Ezekiel Duran status hasn't been updated yet. It was supposed to be a minimum stay on the DL. I don't have a second baseman.
You're tilting your brains out about fantasy baseball. It's June 1st, man.
Don't have a second baseman. I would really appreciate a second baseman. And Texas Rangers, if you can get Ezekiel Duran back in the lineup, that would be great. So it's the second half of the show. You know what that means. It's time to talk about Kadarius Toney. It's time to talk about the Chiefs receiver core, where they just won a Super Bowl basically without a receiver core. They let their default number 1 receiver depart, but in practice, he really was not a number 1 receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's gone. Sky Moore, who was a rookie disappointment, is back, hopefully progressing. They basically took a second chance on Sky Moore when they used a 2nd round pick on Rashee Rice, another smallish school receiver. SMU is more of a football school than Western Michigan. Western Michigan's actually a good football school, but you know what I mean. Where they're kind of running it back with a guy not proven in a Power 5 conference on day 2. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility in this receiver core. They're talking up Kadarius Toney, as one does, as a number 1 type receiver. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, Pat Mahomes has talked up Kadarius Toney too. Who in the world do we prioritize in fantasy in this receiver core? Do we really just go all in again on Kadarius Toney as a mid-range wide receiver 3 is what he's being drafted at right now? Or do you take a riskier but cheaper flyer on Rashee Rice? Do you run it back with Sky Moore? Denny Carter, what in the world do you do?
I'm the number 1
best player on the planet, and you don't even feel like you can draft any of his receivers.
That's right. And Patrick Mahomes was very open about that last summer when I didn't believe him. I was like, no, there's something up here. But he was very earnest and open with the media and said, I don't know who I'm going to target besides Travis Kelce. It doesn't really, what he didn't say, and what he maybe meant was, it doesn't matter. I'm so good. It doesn't matter who the receiver is. and we saw with super washed Juju last year, he made him look decent some of the time. He made Mecole Hardman look decent some of the time. He made MVS.
No,
MVS.
don't say it. He didn't make MVS look decent all the time. Don't
No,
say
I mean, occasionally.
there are limits to even what Patrick Mahomes can do.
So,
all right?
so here's my strategy with Patrick Mahomes pass catchers. They don't matter. And so I don't have any interest. I love Kadarius Toney. We talked about him ad nauseum on the show. I have no interest at wide receiver 36. None. Okay. Marquise Brown is going there. Tyler Lockett is going there. Jahan Dotson's going there. No, I'm taking all those guys easily over Kadarius Toney. I'm done. I'm done with all this. I'm not reading all this. This is what
I thought he was wide receiver 29. You are correct. It's wide receiver 36, which makes it surely this time it counts at wide receiver 36.
No, man,
right,
no,
Kyle?
it doesn't. It just
counts. This time it counts. It doesn't, but does it?
No, it does. I mean, he's super efficient. He's super efficient. He scores
at
like
pulling his hamstring.
Right. He scores like three fantasy points every time he touches the ball. I get it. I understand all this. Like, it makes sense to me. But first, the Chiefs don't care, which is an important part of this equation. Chiefs don't care. They can say, we think he's a number one. And the nature of the Kansas City offense is one that revolves around Kelsey, and sort of gives the scraps to everybody else. And I'm not taking a receiver who's getting scraps, even if he's efficient. I'm just not.
Kyle, do you agree it doesn't count this time?
Look, if I get Mahomes early in some drafts, I'll take him. But like, that's almost the only scenario. Because I agree. Like, he's a guy where you do projections and you're like, oh, unless I give him a bunch of snaps, which he's never done before, the Chiefs didn't do with him. And sure, he was banged up. He was new to the team last year. Well, when did it count most? The Super Bowl? He played like 5 snaps in the Super Bowl or something. It was absurd.
Hello.
So, sure, yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing. You can always tell yourself, look at if you only post a cut up of the snaps he's played, it's the greatest 14-second highlight reel you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But he has to do a thing that he's never done before, which is like get on the field often, stay on the field, and then see how that efficiency scales with being on the field more. Because it's also easy to be efficient when you have 3 designed plays for you. They run all 3 of them, they take you off the field and never put you on again. So I understand, like Denny said, I understand why we want to be excited about him. But one, I like, it's obvious that his efficiency, which is leading the league essentially, would not scale with more snaps. That's just like how being an efficient backup works. So to what degree does it scale? That's something we have to find out. We have to find out if he can earn more snaps, if he can stay healthy. I'm not really getting any of him as like a standalone player. I think if I'm taking Mahomes, I'm trying to find stacks wherever I can, and that's one of them. But, I'd rather shoot my shots on someone like Sky Moore or Rashee Rice. People are into Justin Ross. I am most certainly not, but knock yourselves out. Have fun.
What if I told you that I didn't tell you how many games he played? I just told you Kadarius Toney spent no time on injured reserve this year. Then what would be reasonable?
Oh, all right. That's a good question.
What would be reasonable?
He spends, I don't know, but like, even when he's healthy, he doesn't play a lot, but spending no time on injury reserve feels like that's a good caveat. I would probably take him as like a top 24 receiver because he still is like almost certainly you're hinting that he misses some games, but not long stretches.
Say he's playing 13 or 14 games if he doesn't miss injured reserve. If he doesn't,
but that's a pretty good chunk of the season. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
But how much of those games is he playing?
He's active for for 14 games. He's active for 14, meaning he's on the 46-man Sunday roster for 14 games.
How many times have we seen this guy play 7 snaps and then leave the game? Like, that's what happens.
And then he's very efficient. He always just goes immediately on IR then, though.
That's true.
This time he's not going on IR. I'd say I think he would. Have you told me Kadarius Toney is not on IR at any point in 2023? I would say he's for sure like a top 28 receiver at least, and probably
I'd go with that.
That doesn't say that much though. That's probably true of like a bunch of receivers we care about, because Denny's right. Like, imagine like if you looked at games played as like you play 98% of the offensive snaps, you get credit for 0.98 games played. Even if you say he's active for 14 games, if you were to actually compartmentalize the amount of games he played, it only guarantees us that he plays like 4.5 games. Whereas like Javonte plays 17 games. He's on the field for 98.8% of the snaps, right? So he would, he's a full 17.
Hates every second of it. But
right. We know how the Kadarius Toney game goes. He runs 7 routes. On the 7th route, he catches the ball. He sticks his foot in the ground. He collapses. He limps to the sideline. And first of all, the announcers have never heard of Kadarius Toney, so they don't even notice.
Tony Romo had to be reintroduced to Kadarius Toney 9 different times last season.
No. I've seen a lot of Kansas City games. They're all like, "Oh, number whatever. Hey, look at that guy. He's fast." And so he leaves, and then you never see him again. This is how it goes.
It is how it goes. So the Chiefs, Kyle broke it down well too. They're not even any particularly appealing flyers to take, which is just insane considering it's Patrick Mahomes. Maybe someone becomes appealing as the summer goes on. It is early in the drafting process. Another up in the air receiver core with bigger names. I don't know, maybe not bigger names. The Carolina Panthers. I just feel like we don't really know who to prioritize for the Carolina Panthers. They spent some money on Adam Thielen. They spent some money on DJ Shark. Spent some draft capital on Jonathan Mingo. They're talking up Laviska Shenault. There's Deebo Samuel. Just what on earth? Where is the value at in this Panthers receiver core, Kyle? Who should we be prioritizing out of the Panthers as they break in number 1 overall pick Bryce Young?
I feel like I'd have to go on a cost basis with DJ Chark because the thing is he's not expensive to draft.
What is that cost? Yeah.
I'll pull it up, but he's not. We're getting like so much Mingo hype for a prospect who just like analytically, and the reason I say analytically is because they're rather predictive. Didn't look very good. Was just not extremely productive, and it also comes with the caveat that last year's most productive season, he did all of his damage against, I believe it was Vanderbilt, the 130 out of 131 EPA per play defense, and an FCS school. So like. He's really got some Mickey Mouse levels of production in those 2 games and nothing else to his name, essentially. So I think he's probably overpriced, but I get the upside chasing of a dude he is physically built very similar to A.J. Brown. He happened to wear the same jersey as A.J. Brown in college, too. I don't know about number-wise, but same colors. I would go with DJ Chark because he's better than Adam Thielen, but still cheaper than the probably a bit too hyped rookie. And I'm not drafting Adam Thielen because he was drastically inefficient last year. I mean, nearly league bottom in yards per route run, and his yards per route run has dropped year over year over year over year. I think that's 4 times. It's dropped 4 times in a row. So I'll take the guy who's in the middle ground of good but cheap because I also don't want to be investing a ton of money into this offense. It's got a rookie quarterback and a new coaching staff at the helm. It's probably not going to be great. Maybe it exceeds our expectations, but those aren't high expectations. So give me the best cost-adjusted player. It's Chark.
Denny, there was someone I forgot to mention that I feel like you want to mention.
No.
Well, look, you know how I know I'm getting old.
How is that?
5 years ago, I would have completely dismissed this guy and be like, he's dust. He's dust. He's gone. And today I'm saying I'm drafting Adam Thielen.
To say the Terrace Marshall line. I set you up to say the Terrace Marshall line.
Oh, Terrace Marshall. Yeah, him too.
Instead, you're talking about
him too.
Instead, you're talking about Adam Thielen.
No. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, I'm getting old because Terrace. You know who's not old? Terrace Marshall, who turns 23 in 8 days, folks. Okay, he's entering his age 23. Give him time. The coaches, they're loving him more and more. They're looking more strongly into what he can do well. He had a pretty decent second half of the season in an insanely run heavy Carolina offense. Let's remember that. But as for Thielen, the thing that Kyle and the corrupt mainstream media won't tell you about Thielen is this:
that he's a tight end.
Whatever. I like my tight ends catching 8 balls for 40 yards. It is this: the Vikings for some reason moved Thielen to the outside last year. He only played 30% of his snaps, I believe 35% of his snaps from the slot, which was drastically different from when he was, I don't know, fantasy relevant. That's going to change here. He's going to be put back into the slot at a high rate. And I think that he has an opportunity to just emerge as a kind of a PPR scam for the Panthers. There were, I'm looking at Alabama slot receiver production from last season with Bryce Young, and he targeted the slot at a pretty high rate. You have over 80 receptions from Alabama receivers from the slot last year. So anyway, I can't put those numbers into context in the moment. But what I'm saying is, I like Thielen to just fall into some volume here.
I always make the tight end joke, and part of that's because he is so heavily targeted in the red zone. And that if you're going to carve out a niche, you want to carve out the niche of like, we got to target this guy inside the 20. And I'm sure that was part of the Panthers' calculation when they acquired Adam Thielen. This guy can be a big red zone target for the rookie quarterback, a safe pair of hands, and the most important part of the field. So there are actual valid Adam Thielen arguments, even though no one on planet Earth wants to draft him, Kyle. I'm not saying
30. He's 33 years old, coming off a career worst season. The season before that, he was slightly more efficient. Like, you can see the steps keep going down. They don't work their way back up ever. It's a long trend line that goes one direction. It correlates well with his age, correlates with him getting cut at we're one season away from the bottom of that trend line, I think. So this is terrible. And this is another one. What do you win?
When people don't trust the media. They got facts, they've got trends, they've got like actual context. This way you can't have it.
What happens if everything goes right with your Adam Thielen pick? You get like a wide receiver 5.
You get a
slam dunk, bring it home.
No. That's like you get in PPR. If everything goes right, you get a wide receiver 3.
We'll see. We'll see.
That's the hope. That's the hope. But Terrace Marshall is one to watch. He is one to watch. He came on at the end of last year. Also, Matt Rule hated Terrace Marshall's guts. Like he was a healthy scratch for some of his rookie season. It was so insulting for a second round pick. He could Matt Rule was out on him. I mean, Matt Rule was the kind of guy who, if you weren't from Baylor or if you weren't from Temple, they didn't know you. Sorry, kid. I don't know. You didn't go to Baylor. You get out of here. So that Terrace Marshall was in a bad spot to be drafted by one of the worst coaches in recent history. And now he has a coach who knows what he's doing.
Let that be a lesson. If you don't activate Terrace Marshall, they will literally send you to Nebraska. No offense to our friends in Nebraska. I live in sort of the same region of the country, but yeah, just be careful out there. Keep your head on a swivel. I don't know why I even put this team on here. I was talking about like receiver groups, skill groups, where it's uncertain where the value is. Definitely uncertain where the value is in this Patriots skill group, because is there any of it at all? And tell you what I thought they really needed to do was spend more money on tight end, and they did that. Mike Gesicki. Yeah. And I mean, Kyle, like what are the Zoomers? What are you best ball hipsters? Who are you prioritizing in the Patriots skill core, if anybody?
I feel like the best ball Zoomers are going to talk themselves into Tyquan Thornton.
I kind of am, actually. Even the Boomers are. I feel like there's like a horseshoe alignment with Boomers and Zoomers, because like for me, the horseshoe for Tyquan Thornton is big plays. I'm like, yeah, this guy's going to make some big plays. And the Zoomers are probably like seeing some efficiency, some yards per route run.
Well, the Zoomers are not seeing yards per route. And I can tell you that's not what they're looking at, because it was horrific last year.
Ooh, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, I didn't think he was a particularly exciting fantasy prospect coming into the league. I don't think he's a particularly great fit with this offense. And he wasn't really last year. Like, he scored touchdowns, right? But like, he didn't actually on a per route basis look good. And I don't think his offense is going to be great. It'll probably be better because it's hard to be worse. It was terrible last year because, again, they had like some architect or something, not an offensive architect. They had like a Victorian stone architect trying to run their offense. He also occasionally moonlit. Yeah, he was a literal architecture man. I guess he also worked in some other teams on defensive capacity. Again, throughout his resume, I'm not hearing any offense. So I think this team is going to be better. I just go with Devontae Parker. Like, Devontae Parker is just actually confirmed good. He was all right in the offense, had a few spike games. Yeah, he's good. He's not great.
One good stretch in one season is kind of how I look at Devontae Parker. He went nuts after the trade deadline one year. It was when someone else was hurt too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was when the other receiver,
Preston Williams.
Yeah, Preston Williams. Yeah, but you got to hand it to him for stepping up. And also, you're right. Devontae Parker is the one here. I'm not interested in Juju. I'm not interested that much in Tyquan Thornton. I mean, Thornton is a big play guy, but he will be very frustrating for fantasy purposes. You're going to plug him in. You're going to get a 0, or you're going to get a 20 out of Tyquan Thornton.
Real quick, Denny, Dalton Kincaid or Mike Gesicki?
What I mean, you mean straight up or for the price?
Straight up, not for the price.
Well, I guess Kincaid.
You made him cave. Why would anyone take Mike Gesicki? What is I don't get like what the sales pitch is. Like I get that he's different than Jonnu, but we saw last year like Hunter Henry was hardly usable and he was the tight end one, let alone like what are they even going to do with Mike Gesicki? Like I think it's an app.
I think Hunter Henry's body is broken down and he's like just purely a red zone player and they were just a nightmare in the red zone last year and maybe that's what happened to Hunter Henry. I mean Gesicki I guess is just that he's like the old-fashioned catch-only tight end, and the Dolphins weren't interested in that, but apparently Bill Belichick is, even though he's going to hate this guy so much.
He is going
to. Yeah, I agree. Like he is a very hyper-specific usage player on an offense. Like you said, I think we're still going to see a lot of running in the red zone. We can still see Hunter Henry in the red zone, and they have like physical outside guys like Devontae Parker who can be used in the red zone. So I think the red zone role is low. I think the overall snaps are going to be very low, like not a great amount of targets. But they also don't pass the football. They don't pass the football well. Like, oh, man, what are we doing with Mike Gesicki? Come on.
I guess nothing.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki, first and foremost, will never block. And I don't think that's going to work on a Bill Belichick.
Yeah, that's true. We like it. Unless it's for Bill
Belichick. Mike Gesicki is like the antithesis of your don't go out there and block because he tried that strategy last year, and boy, it got him sent packing.
I mean, that was so predictable, too. Mike McDaniel was like, we need a really strong blocking tight end. And Mike Gesicki was like, wait, what? Wait, you need what?
Before they ran that by him, they franchise tagged him. It wasn't really a great process. Well, it's franchise tag. They tagged him first, then asked if he might block later.
Yeah.
And his response was just all lowercase, lol, no. And no punctuation or anything. And by the way, I get condemned sometimes for saying "lol." Is that how do other people say it, or they just say "lol"? Like
I think because you're old, unfortunately. Sorry.
Yikes!
I mean, it's direct. He's direct.
Tough crowd around here. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, maybe it's because you're young. Ever think of that?
Ever think of that?
I think I just said the same thing.
Ever instantly know what team drafted Percy Harvin? I didn't think so. And no, you did.
I also don't know who any of these baseball players you name are, which is another really crushing penalty to me to not understand the most boring sport.
Do you know what team Andrew Benintendi's on? He came up in Galaxy Brains today.
Kansas City?
He used to be. Good guess, actually. He was traded to the Yankees last year. Now he's on the White Sox, and he's the only qualified hitter in the league, meaning he's qualified for the batting title, not to have a home run. He's down tremendously bad.
And he was like your first draft pick or something?
No. But I made a DFS joke about him. I didn't draft him.
Can I ask a quick baseball question? So I had baseball on in the background. They said the Seattle Mariners are maybe not going to have a representative at the All-Star game this year because they're so bad, right? And
no.
No? Okay, maybe.
Well, here, continue. I'll set you straight.
Who's the guy who signed the $10 trillion
Julio
J-Rod?
And he's bad now. Is that what
he's just off to a very poor start this season? But first off, baseball actually does mandate that you have an all-star from every team. The game is also in Seattle. So even if that rule didn't exist, they would force one in. I don't know what they could have been saying. But
because the announcers were like, you can't possibly put J-Rod in here. He's not good enough. They
have some pitchers. George Kirby might be an all-star. They're lacking candidates, but they'll probably just
Lewis Gilbert, Kellenic, Jared Kellenic,
Logan Gilbert.
So J-Rod went from the most exciting player in baseball to not an all-star.
No, he's been pretty hot. He'll probably make the all-star. He'll probably get voted in anyway, because the fans they let us communist fans vote for the players into the game, so he'll probably be in there anyway. Speaking of communism, I told Denny we let him talk about Luke Musgrave. No, it is pretty interesting. New Packers tight end, some pretty real draft capital. The Packers press corps, Denny, is speculating that not speculating, they're saying he's earning first-team reps and OTAs. What do you want to tell the folks about Luke Musgrave?
Yeah, so, back in May, The Athletic reported that Musgrave, quote, should get a chance right away to be the number one tight end, pass-catching tight end more specifically. So we have that going for us. Matt LaFleur praised the rookie tight end as a quick learner, adding that he has, quote, an elite trait and that he can fly, which is amazing. This is the first NFL player who did it. And and he's a large target, and it's true. He is a large man. Now
Sounds like the spruce goose.
Yeah, he's 6'7", 260. Okay, like he's large. So it's hard to really make a judgment on him based on his college days at Oregon State, because last year he caught 11 passes for 170 yards in 2 games before suffering a season-ending knee injury. So, I don't know what you take from that. But we like I said earlier in the show, we like our hyper athletic guys, pass catchers, and he is one. His relative athletic score was 9.71, very, very high.
Wow, that's actually off the charts for a tight end.
Yeah, like truly staggering for a guy that large. So we are interested. We are interested as a guy who could fall into snaps in routes, more specifically in a pass catching unit that doesn't really have a dominate, or even Christian Watson's probably not going to dominate targets there. So I think that there will be some targets to spread around, maybe to Musgrave.
And yet you don't like Dalton Kincaid. Sure, he quote literally didn't test, but still.
And I know I have been looking for that second good college game that he had.
My gosh. Yikes, the YouTubers are
they're going to be so
yeah.
bad.
Well, Denny, if you like second good college games, you'll love Luke Musgrave. Like you said, he's, through 2 games, and like I agree. Like I'm trying to echo your point about him being a complete black box. He was on some like pretty bad offenses at Oregon State and didn't see a ton of playing time.
Well, first of all, they don't actually play Pac-12 games. All these are just simulations. The Pac-12 isn't our actual football conference that exists.
Yeah, has anyone been in the same room as a Pac-12 football game?
No, it's never happened.
Didn't think so.
I haven't seen one.
Closest I've been to the same room as my Xbox. So, yeah, but like you were saying, Denny, there was potential, and it was just so unrealized in the final season. I mean, like 11-169-1 in 2 games for a tight end is dominant. Like if he was going to push up for 800-900 yards, it would have been an incredible season. He had a 33% dominator, 3.3 yards per team pass attempt through 2 games. We just have no clue what's going to happen. It looked like it was promising, and because athletic measurables at the tight end position correlate to success more so than most other positions, especially for easily the most for our fantasy minds, it looks like maybe there's some truth to that 2-game breakout. So he's kind of interesting. I ultimately think we probably see a committee, because he wasn't even the only tight end they drafted. They have Tucker Kraft, I believe. I kind of like too. So
Robert Tonyan did depart in free agency to the Chicago.
Well, they have what former second-round H-back Josiah Deguara can just soak up snaps like you've never seen.
Surprised they haven't extended him yet.
Deguara.
Going into the final year of his rookie deal. The Jordan Love draft class is really maturing finally. 4 years later.
It just takes a presidential term. That's all.
Yeah, that's all it takes. It's very normal use of a first-round draft pick. Very normal use of June. They said we couldn't make it 60 minutes, but we just had a very normal use of time, podcast time, when we made it an hour, and we made history. No, it was a really good show, actually. There's some interesting storylines out there. Breece Hall and Javonte Williams are going to be 2 of the most fateful summer draft picks, I feel like. So it probably won't be the last time we talk about them. It won't be the last time you hear from us. Although the last time you're going to hear from me in over a week. I'm going to be out of town next week on a work trip. Our magazine is going into production. Denny Carter, Kyle Dvorchak, Lawrence Jackson should be coming at you on Monday. And Denny, Kyle, and I will be back later next week. So for Denny, for Kyle, I'm Pat. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back later.